Okay, it's another stream. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Okay, Brian. Has the noise gone away? Can hear you. All good. Okay, well, I tell you what, I'm just going to wait for a minute and see if anybody comes over from that other thing. Oh, Jackie's there. Good, much better. Okay, yes, it's clean. Well, I am no longer using my beautiful AKG microphone and my mixing board, as you can tell, because the reverb has disappeared. So I don't need to wear those goddamn headphones, and I'm just going to, well, we'll use the little microphone that's attached to my camera, and hopefully that's going to do it. Hello, Kelowna Girl, Jose, how are you? Nancy Atkinson, yeah. Linda Manger. No crackling noise. Okay, you know what? I'm going to try and sort that out later, but right now we're relying on the microphone that came with this fancy USB camera. If I had to use the microphone attached to my Mac laptop, it would suck so badly. You would not like. Okay, so we're back. We've gone through the third verse, and now we're into, then I sing another chorus, which is sort of so that the form of this song, if you want to know, is A, verse, B, chorus, A, verse 3, B. So A, B, and then the bridge. And the bridge in the song is a chance to go somewhere different. It's a chance to do something you haven't done before, lyrically and musically. So if I'm going back to the form of the song, I'm standing at a window, I'm pressed against the past. There's the verse form. Oh, Canada, the longest road I've known. So you've heard the chorus at this point twice. You've heard the verse melody 3 times, and now I bring in a new chord and I go somewhere else. Where was I? I'm standing and I'm pressed against the past. I'm looking on, oh, can I have to rewind the film to get to this section? I just can't jump in. Pay for the kind of broken hearts that lead to broken homes. Looking backwards, I remember paving stones and the distances I've traveled out of Canada. Okay, so then we go to the bridge. I awoke, wrapped in my mother's arms on the docks of Montreal. The ships lit like Christmas, and the moon a swollen ball. And when a sailor spoke of England, I never felt so small. So I'm going to just show you the shapes. I'm going somewhere different with this. I'm trying to go musically somewhere different and guitar-wise somewhere different. And the story is still about the traveling. We're still sort of in that mode. But I'm kind of letting you know that I've woken up, that we're somehow, something different has changed. We're not just chugging along on the train anymore. And that was literally the end of the train ride. And we transitioned from the train to the Empress of Canada, which was the ship that took us across the Atlantic. And the ship would basically leave the port of Montreal, go down the St. Lawrence, and then across the Atlantic and on to Liverpool. And from Liverpool, obviously we got into well, it doesn't matter. The journey of the song kind of ends there, even though it's about going to Ireland. The song is actually about going to England. And I talk about being wrapped in my mother's arms on the docks of Montreal. That's just complete fiction. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. But I wanted, again, I don't want to tell you the train stopped in Montreal and we all got off and got onto a boat. And it's just so boring to do it that way. So I want you to see it. I want you to see me, little 6-year-old Stephen, wrapped in my mother's arms on the docks of Montreal, and the ships lit like Christmas. Okay, so imagine a ship with a mast and the lights, right? Christmas tree. That's what I was driving at, trying to make you see it. And the moon, a swollen ball, right? Well, ball rhymes with Montreal and small. So, there is a rhyme scheme going on. I'm kind of telegraphing it, but the moon, a swollen, it has to be ball. It's got to be. On the docks of Montreal and the moon, a swollen ball, it has to be. And when a sailor spoke of England, I'd never felt so small. I was clearly trying to find another word that rhymes with Montreal, ball, small. And so I invented this whole thing of a sailor speaking of England. I was 6 years old. I mean, I have very vague memories of this trip. One of the things I remember really clearly was the swimming pool as we crossed the Atlantic. I remember the Vancouverites and singing Swinging on a Star. And I also remember on the train trip that my stepfather bought me a penknife. It was probably one of those Welcome to Canada, and had a beaver on it, and it said Canada on the other side, and it probably had a little blade and a big blade. But holy cow, it was my first knife. You're 6 years old. Somebody gives you a penknife. It's like being given a car. And I remember sitting there and cutting paper cups up. And I was so bored by the train ride, because after the first day of running up to the dome car and down and pestering the porters, black porters, it was those days, man. But like, what else do you do? It's like, eat, sleep, stare out the window. You're too young to read. Your parents are trying to have a honeymoon, so please would you buzz off. And your sisters hate you because they're older than you. So I was bored, but I really don't have many memories. So I made up the sailor speaking of England, and I probably made it up because I wanted you to know that we're about to cross the Atlantic from Montreal to England. I had to somehow get England into it, and also then I could sort of say I'd never felt so small when a sailor spoke of England. I have no idea why. Why would that make you feel small? But it rhymes with ball in Montreal, so there you go. And then I'd never felt so small. Something has to happen. It's the end of the bridge, and when a sailor spoke of England, I never felt so small. Let's have a little musical interlude, and England is Big Ben. And it's also Lenny Breau. I was listening to Lenny Breau, and I remember he had this piece called 5 o'clock bells in the morning. And I think he was probably doing it with harmonics, it's Lenny Breau. But I remembered that, and this tune is in drop D. I'll tilt this camera a bit more so you can see the guitar. So I'm in drop D, and in D you can, if you pedal on the A string, and then go up a bit, five, one, and we're back to the tonic, which is the drop D tuning in D, E, F. Oh, we're in G, I think. Anyway, that's theory. I don't actually know any theory. I'm useless at that stuff. So then I take us musically on this little interlude that talks about England, and we're going to England because I'm playing the Big Ben thing, and then I have to go through da 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 da, and I go back to the intro. And it gives me a chance to just whittly on the guitar a little bit. And I'll show you, I'll talk about that after. I promise I'll go and talk about it. But basically, I'm trying to create some space, and then I go to the last verse. And the last verse is kind of, it's poignant for me because it's leaving Canada. It's actually leaving Canada. We've left my father, my biological father, way back on the West Coast. We've left that time, and then there's been this transition, this train ride across Canada, which is such an eye opener, even at 6 years old. And even though I was born, of course, in hindsight, you realize, oh my God, that was my first big road trip. And what a road trip. And haven't I been doing that ever since? Haven't I been, I mean, in some ways that this song and that journey set me up for being a singer-songwriter, because it was all there. It's like traveling, so much upheaval, so much change. Road songs are about what you're leaving behind, where you're going, and what you're seeing along the way. And for me, this song has those elements. And so this verse, I waited until the ocean turned from emerald to gray. Well, you know that feeling if you've ever been on a deep sea vessel, a deep sea ocean going vessel. There's a point where the ocean changes color. And it's when you go from the shallow water to the deep water. So emerald to gray. When you get out in the Atlantic, man, it's the wildest feeling. I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to do it again, but I remember it very clearly, because you suddenly are out in the middle of the Atlantic and you can't see land anywhere. And this huge ship that seems so amazingly powerful and massive, when you get off a little dinky train and there's this ship and you get on it, suddenly it's tiny, and you're in the middle of the Atlantic and the water is gray, and you've left the emerald water behind, the sort of shallow shore water. The wind threshed the water and washed our wake away. So a little more poetic license there again, because of course the wind doesn't wash the wake away, but the wake disappears as you travel. You can kind of see it sort of disappearing. It's like the vapor trail of a jet. If you watch a jet flying above you, you can see where the vapor trail just kind of disappears, and the wake of an ocean liner kind of disappears. And the idea is that it's sort of like sweeping your tracks away. That's what the wind's doing. And then I got into this image that I really love. And the seagulls blew like words back to the mouth of the St. Lawrence. There's a point when you're on an ocean-going vessel that the seagulls, they hang around for quite a while. They actually, I seem to recall, I think that they hung around past the point where we couldn't see the land anymore, because they're getting scraps from the galley and stuff that's getting flushed out. The seagulls are tucking in, and there's a point where they go, okay, that's enough. We have to fly home. And they go back and they leave you. And then you really are out in the deep water, because even the seagulls are gone. I seem to remember that. Maybe they don't. Maybe they fly all the way across the Atlantic with you, but I doubt it. I think that they go home. You might pick up more seagulls on the way, but anyway, I've got the seagulls going back to the St. Lawrence, and it's kind of the idea of the seagulls being like words. When you're on the deck and it's really blowing, and you could be shouting at someone, but the wind is literally blowing the sound away. And it's an interesting phenomena. Anybody who's been to a folk festival and when there's a wind out and there's a performer on stage, the sound kind of comes and goes, because the wind is literally blowing the sound from the main speakers away from you. And so that's what I'm getting at as we sailed out on the Empress of Canada. And so if you'll notice, each verse ends with the word Canada. So first verse, I'm falling into faces, cultivated smiles, two-dimensional, je me souviens, Canada. And then the second verse, I heard in them for the first time the endless song of traveling out of Canada. And the prairies, we all stood there, posed for Polaroids of Canada. And then I go on about the Empress of Canada. And I can't remember which verse I wrote first. I think I wrote the verse about the prairies and the Polaroid. I think I wrote that first. It doesn't matter, but I'm continuing. I set up a system which is every verse ends with Canada. And the choruses do too. Every single verse and chorus ends with the word Canada. So really, if I'd been smart, I would have called it Canada. But instead, I called it The Longest Road, because I'm an idiot. And everybody else calls it the Canada song. I call it The Longest Road. So then I sing the chorus one more time. And then I do a thing which is called a tag, which is I sing the chorus melody, but I change the words. And so instead of going, "Oh Canada, the longest road I've known," and I go, "Oh Canada, the first country of my youth, my heart was ever drawn to you like a tongue to a broken tooth." A tongue to a broken tooth. That image came from a poem that I used to live with a really great poet, a woman named Angela Herenick, and she had that image in one of her poems. I don't know if she had it exactly like that, but I remember that image going, a tongue to a broken tooth. Holy cow, that's a great image for a painful memory, for something you just can't. If you've ever had a broken tooth, man, you cannot keep your tongue away from it. It's just one of those things. And when you leave the country of your birth, when you leave your father behind, when you leave that whole June and Cleaver picnics with the church by the fire engine, like when you leave all that behind, it's this thing that you just keep. Even as a 6-year-old, I kept thinking about it. I kept going back to it, and that's what I'm trying to get to. Is this sort of raw memory that was there, and Canada became. It just embodied it. Even the word embodied it. So when I moved to Ireland at the age of 7 years old, and I lived in Ireland for 11 years, which is potentially much more formative than the first 7 years of my life in many ways. Certainly from my own sort of conscious thing and becoming a teenager and all that stuff. Ireland is very much where I'm from, but Canada's this place that existed when I was a little kid, and I left it, and it always stayed with me. It was always this potent thing. And that's what I'm trying to get at, like a tongue to a broken tooth. In a world where everyone was always leaving, okay, so I think you know what I'm getting at. I was trying to keep my fingertips on Canada. Trying to hang on. I was trying to hang on to this thing called Canada, which is the country, which is that part of my life. So there you go. That's the song. And yes, there's always backstories like this with all these things. And I used to wish that people would get it all, but of course you can't. What I love about songs is that people get their own things from it. And it's taken me a long, long time to understand that people will fit their own images and their own memories to it. And whether or not they get what I was driving at really doesn't matter. So I've just given you what mine was, but yours are equally as important. I'm just going to look and see if there's anything, the favorite line, the tongue to a broken tooth. I know people love that. And I've just outed myself as sort of stealing that image. But Hank Williams said, and I think this is a direct quote, "Oh, he stole from me, but I stole from everybody." Amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Yeah, so Jennifer's kind of suggesting which song would you like me to do in the future episodes. I'm definitely interested in your opinion on what I should do next, but I'll got to be honest with you. I'm going to pick the one that resonates for me, because if there's stories like this attached, it makes it more fun. The last thing I really want to talk about with this, and I'm going to just zoom down to the guitar, is what I'm doing with this song. So it's in drop D. And I could easily, I tend to play in drop D all the time. Drop D is your low E string goes. So there's a standard tuning. There's an E chord. There's a D chord. And the thing with the D chord is that you can only play the 4 strings unless you're going. Well, you can't play the low E. It just doesn't really work. But if you tune the low E down to a D, which is, there's your D string right there, tune the low E down. Now you're in drop D. And you can play 5 strings, and you get the double whammy of the D string and the low E string that's now D. You get the double whammy of those two strings resonating together. And then, of course, there's 3 Ds. It's just this beautiful big chord. But all the other chords have to change if you use the E string in those chords. So here's a G chord. Normally a G chord looks like this, but because I've tuned this string down, I have to fret a full fret up to get the... I love drop D. Drop D is honestly my whole last record, The Unconquerable Past. Everything is in drop D. Even if I'm not playing in D, like in a D shape, even if I'm playing in C or in G or even an A, I will play in drop D because I'm so used to it. There's a chord that starts the bridge in this song, which is like an F shape with a D on the bass. And that's just a beautiful chord for me. And that's the same chord I use in a song on Every Soul's a Sailor. Gone But Not Forgotten. G. So yeah, drop D. Drop D is the shit. It really is a great one. And if you want to get really cool, you can tune your high E string, this one, down to a D as well. And now you're in double drop D. But I'll wait for another song to get into that. This song is in drop D, and I capo it up just because I wanted to have... There's a fair bit of range in this song, but if I was down here, I'm standing at a window, it's a little low. Up here, this fret or this fret is good. I'm standing at a window. You get you can hit that note with some authority. And of course, there's one thing to be playing this at home when you're just writing the song, but what happens is you think, oh yeah, I'll be able to hit that low note, no problem. And then you get in front of an audience and you want to sing everything with this kind of like your Ethel Merman voice, you know? You don't want to be singing with this kind of voice because it just doesn't project. And so you have to project. And so you capo up so that you can, I'm standing at a window. It has some authority and you can project. That's why I've capoed it to there. It was because the melody dictated it. I'm pressed against the past. There's the G shape, E minor shape, but again in drop D. So I'm covering the low E string. It's an E minor 7, not an E minor. I'm looking on in black and white through the eyes of photographs. So that's an A sus shape. And I'm falling into faces. That's a B minor shape with the bass string descending. Falling into faces. And again, it's not a minor. I've left this string, the G string open. I'm falling into faces. Then I go to the E minor shape and I ascend. Cultivated smiles, A shape, 2-dimensional. Je souviens, can, which is an A sus shape, Canada. Now, all these chords and all this stuff that I'm blathering on about right now, sorry, I won't make you sick. If you really want this stuff, if you want this tab, if you want to know exactly what I'm doing, go to stephenfearing.com and there are tabs. I don't read or write music. I'm it that way. I wish I did, but I don't. So quite some time ago, I asked Jason Fowler, who is a superb guitar player and knows all this stuff inside out, if he would transcribe a bunch of songs. And they are sitting there, stephenfearing.com, go to music, go to shop, and then scroll down and you'll see transcripts. And the transcript for this song is there, both in tab, I believe, and in standard notation. So you can get all these chords. But what's important, what I'm trying to get across to you is the fact that I'm doing this thing in the song, which is a combination that I do. which is I use my plastic nails, and I'm doing a combination of finger picking and strumming. I love that. I love being able to go back and forth between strumming and picking. If I was to use a plectrum, I would immediately be restricted, because if you can do this combination of strumming and picking with your fingers, you can use all four of them. It's so easy to go from so easy to go from strumming to picking. I do a lot of strumming with my finger on the upstroke. I do a lot of as if I was holding a pick, but I'm not. And it's basically this finger with the nail, which is plastic, and my thumb, which is the nail again, which is currently broken, but it's a plastic. I use acrylic nails. So this song is a really good example of strumming and picking. The only other thing that's worth mentioning is the arrangement. So I set up a theme on the guitar at the very start. I set that up and I revisit it several times. Repetition is a great thing, and you can start a song, and a lot of people start songs by going, "I'm going to play these chords. They are the chords of the song, so I'm just going to play them." Those are basically the chords 1, 4, 5 of the song. But it's so nice if you can figure out a riff or a hook or some little instrumentally thing that is a signature of the song. It's a hook. It's basically a hook. And so I try to come up with one. It's all in D with the bass string droning. Now I vary it, the minor. Anyway, it's all in the transcript if you want it. But the point I'm trying to make is there's a picking element and there's a repetitive element that is important. The only other thing that's worth mentioning is when I get to the second chorus after the Dog Days of the Prairies, I go from sort of picking to more strumming, and I'm definitely trying to get a sense of momentum. I'm trying to get a groove, like a train groove. That's what the song's sort of what I'm trying to do with the guitars, is get that sense of a train. So it goes back to Gordon Lightfoot and the Railroad Trilogy. Okay, I think that's enough. Good God, over an hour. I'm sorry. It's very hard. It's very hard to be brief. If you had to go, see you later. If you stuck around, Willem, thanks so much. And Jason Levers, Nancy Atkinson, thank you very much. Thanks for sticking around. See you down the road. Keep washing your hands. And day by day, folks, day by day.